He was 69 years old. 3 weeks before he died, he sat in his cardiologist's office and heard words that most people find reassuring. Everything looks good. His blood pressure was under control. His cholesterol levels were acceptable. His heart rhythm showed no obvious concerns. There was no urgent warning, no alarming test result, and no indication that his life was about to change forever. By every conventional measure, he appeared stable and well. That evening felt completely ordinary. He had dinner with his wife. They watched television together. They talked about plans for the weekend. Nothing seemed unusual. Nothing suggested danger was approaching. Then he went to bed, and he never woke up. What happened next shocked everyone involved in his care because the possible contributing factor discussed afterward wasn't smoking, uncontrolled hypertension, or a missed medication. It was a habit. A habit that millions of people consider healthy. A habit many physicians recommend for completely understandable reasons. And according to concerns raised during the review of his case, it may have contributed to conditions that increased his cardiovascular vulnerability during the night. Not because the habit was inherently dangerous in every situation, but because the physiology behind it is far more complex than most people realize. That's why this conversation matters. I want to tell you about a man I'll call Arthur. Arthur was a retired schoolteacher. Careful, thoughtful, the type of person who researched every decision before making it. He had been managing mild hypertension successfully for several years with medication. His cardiologist was pleased with his numbers, and his most recent monitoring showed good blood pressure control throughout the day. On paper, everything seemed to be moving in the right direction. But there was one habit Arthur was especially proud of. Every evening at exactly 7 o'clock, he stopped drinking fluids entirely. No water, no tea, no juice, nothing. He had read that avoiding fluids before bed could reduce nighttime urination, the repeated trips to the bathroom that had been interrupting his sleep for years. And to his credit, the strategy seemed to work. He was sleeping longer and waking less frequently throughout the night. His final drink each evening was a cup of herbal tea at 7 o'clock. After that, nothing. Night after night, month after month, year after year. For nearly 2 years, Arthur went to bed believing he had finally solved a frustrating problem. He thought he was practicing excellent sleep hygiene. He thought he had found a simple solution that improved his rest without requiring medication or complicated interventions. Everything about it seemed logical. Then one morning, around 5 o'clock, his wife found him unresponsive. Emergency services were called immediately. The responding team initially suspected a stroke. Later evaluation confirmed a massive ischemic event caused by a blood clot that interrupted blood flow to part of the brain. As physicians reviewed the circumstances surrounding the case, an important question emerged. It was a question Arthur's family wished someone had encouraged them to ask much earlier. What actually happens inside the cardiovascular system when a person regularly goes to bed mildly dehydrated? Most people understand dehydration in simple terms. They think about thirst, headaches, dizziness, fatigue, or feeling lightheaded. Those symptoms are familiar, but far fewer people realize that hydration status can also influence blood concentration, circulation dynamics, vascular stress, and several physiological processes that play important roles in cardiovascular health and resilience. And that brings us to a fascinating observation researchers have studied for decades. Heart attacks and strokes do not occur evenly throughout the day. They cluster disproportionately during the early morning hours. Between approximately 5 o'clock and 10 o'clock in the morning, cardiovascular events rise sharply. Most discussions focus on the morning increase in blood pressure, rising stress hormones, and greater platelet activity. All of those mechanisms matter. But there is another piece of the puzzle. That missing piece involves what happens to the body's fluid balance during the 8 hours spent asleep. And for millions of people who intentionally stop drinking fluids hours before bed, it may be more important than they realize. Today, we're going to explore what researchers have learned about hydration, overnight physiology, blood viscosity, circulation, and cardiovascular vulnerability. More importantly, we'll discuss strategies that may help support hydration without worsening nighttime bathroom trips. Before we talk about solutions, we need to understand what actually happens during sleep. Every night, whether you're aware of it or not, your body continuously loses fluid. Water leaves through breathing. Water evaporates through the skin. Additional fluid is lost through what physiologists call insensible perspiration, losses that occur even when you aren't visibly sweating. In a typical adult, these losses can total 400 to 600 milliliters during the night. The amount can be even higher under certain conditions. A warm bedroom, mouth breathing, snoring, sleep-disordered breathing. All of these factors can increase overnight fluid loss. None of this is abnormal. The body is designed to handle it. The real question isn't whether fluid loss occurs. The question is what condition your circulatory system is in when the night begins. That's where the story becomes significantly more important. A well-hydrated person begins the night with an adequate fluid reserve. As water is gradually lost during sleep, blood concentration rises only modestly. The cardiovascular system compensates effectively, and the changes remain within a manageable range. But when someone intentionally restricts fluids for several hours before bed, the situation changes. The body enters sleep with less reserve. Then the normal overnight losses continue, gradually concentrating the blood further as the hours pass. Think of blood flow like a river. A healthy river moves efficiently around obstacles and through narrow channels. The current remains strong enough to keep everything moving. But if enough water is removed, the river becomes shallower. Flow slows. Areas that were once clear become places where material can accumulate. The cardiovascular system behaves in a surprisingly similar way. As fluid volume declines, blood becomes more concentrated and circulation becomes less efficient. Researchers have long been interested in what they call morning cardiovascular vulnerability. The reason is simple. Several biological processes begin converging at the same time shortly before waking. Blood pressure starts rising. Stress hormones increase. Platelet activity becomes more pronounced. The body's internal clock prepares for the transition from sleep to wakefulness. Now imagine those changes occurring after 8 hours of ongoing fluid loss and reduced overnight fluid reserve. Researchers sometimes describe this situation as multiple risk factors arriving at the same intersection simultaneously. One factor alone may not create a serious problem, but when several factors overlap, vulnerability increases. Think about rush hour traffic. Heavy rain may not cause an accident by itself. Road construction may not cause an accident by itself. Congestion may not cause an accident by itself. But when all three occur together, the likelihood rises dramatically. The cardiovascular system often works the same way. Several modest physiological stresses that might be harmless independently can become more significant when they occur simultaneously. That's one reason researchers pay such close attention to the overnight and early morning period. For Arthur, none of this was on his radar. Like many people, he viewed fluid restriction as a straightforward trade-off. Drink less, wake up less, sleep better, problem solved. What nobody had explained was that the body is constantly balancing multiple priorities at once. Better sleep matters. Hydration matters. Cardiovascular stability matters. And sometimes solving one problem without considering the others can create unintended consequences that remain hidden for years. The challenge becomes even more important as people age. Younger cardiovascular systems generally possess greater reserve capacity, allowing them to adapt more effectively to physiological fluctuations and temporary stresses. With aging, those reserves gradually decline. Blood vessels become less elastic. Arterial plaque becomes more common. Recovery from physiological stress becomes less forgiving. The same degree of dehydration that produces little measurable effect in a healthy 30-year-old may have a much greater impact in someone who is 65, 70, or older. That doesn't mean dehydration automatically causes a stroke or heart attack. The relationship is far more nuanced than that. What it does mean is that hydration becomes one of many variables influencing cardiovascular resilience. And resilience is often what determines how effectively the body navigates periods of increased physiological demand. Another overlooked aspect involves circulating blood volume. Reduced fluid volume means less blood returning to the heart with each beat. To maintain adequate circulation, the cardiovascular system must compensate. In healthy individuals, these adjustments are usually subtle and unnoticed. But in people with underlying cardiovascular disease, reduced reserve capacity, or existing arterial narrowing, maintaining circulation can become more challenging. Think of it like driving a vehicle with a nearly empty fuel tank. The engine still runs. The vehicle still moves, but the margin for unexpected demands becomes smaller. The cardiovascular system functions in much the same way. Hydration doesn't guarantee protection, but inadequate hydration may reduce the body's available margin for adaptation. And that brings us to the most important question. If completely restricting fluids before bed isn't necessarily the ideal answer, what should people do instead? Nobody wants repeated trips to the bathroom throughout the night. Nobody wants poor quality sleep. Nobody wants to exchange one health concern for another. Fortunately, researchers and clinicians have spent years studying exactly this balance, and the answer isn't simply drinking large amounts of water right before bedtime. In fact, that approach often creates an entirely different problem. The solution appears to be timing. The goal is to support hydration throughout the evening while minimizing bladder volume at sleep onset. In other words, maintaining healthy fluid balance without recreating the nocturia that caused many people to restrict fluids in the first place. That's where evidence-based hydration timing strategies begin to make practical sense for many adults.